Um, I'm getting uh, the same type of pushing and nudging and uh, like I don't know why it's not coming through in the right way, but it's because I'm being nitpicky about how I'm saying it. Um, Back in 2019, when I was talking about the burning building and the all of that stuff, um, and was getting the same tower card for like all the readings. It was just coming up nonstop, and I was like, everything's about to change. I'm getting that same kind of thing happening right now. So another like massive global shift. It's not that hard to see in the field, but before everything started rolling, recently in the last like week, um, it, I was like, oh, we're in another thing. And this time around, it's not the tower. Um, it's the Aeon card, which is related to I guess most people know it in the Rider Waite deck as the
Judgment.
uh, the
Judgment.
ju- last, yes.
Yep. Judgment. Yep.
Um, so that's been kind of interesting. And so again, like I've been kind of rooting all of my readings in this kind of like, okay, in the context of massive, like daily life changing cha transformations, we are looking at your individual path, but all of the energy of the path will remain the same, like is for you, but it is on the backdrop against the backdrop of a massive shift that will change maybe some of the players in your experience, some of the ways in which you move, so that we're being touched by the collective in a way that we'll have to negotiate in one way or another. Um, and like no one's immune. That was the feeling that I had. No one is immune to the changes coming up. No one was immune to the changes coming up back then, even if you like were opting out of it, or whatever the pattern is. There's moments where the collective steps in and we're like, okay, we're on this ride together, whether we like it or not. So we're there, and so that's kind of interesting. Um, and it's not. There's a little bit of leeway. It's slow to move because it's quick to come on board and then slow to move. That's the transition between dragon year into snake. And um, the snake will move like a snake, which is that most of the information will be hidden and most of the planning is hidden. And we're encouraged to like keep keep our energy, our resources close to us, and to not project a lot of or spend a lot of energy with like external stuff, because unless we know it's correct, unless we're absolutely sure, it's like lots of planning under the ground and then strike. That's like snakes will sit there forever and then they strike. So there's that kind of chi that's supported. And then next year is a very, very volatile year. So that's the year that I anticipate nothing will be the same. Everything will change. That's the fire horse year. And that's typically known to be a pretty martial war intensity, like, wow, like just everything is out. So that's the vibe. And that also tracks with a lot of astrology, Western astrology as well. And yeah, everybody just knows that we're on the tip of this is just the very tippy toe. the very beginning. This is just the we just got into the first episode or the first yeah, the pilot episode. We had been seeing previews before. Now we're in the episode of the real story. So that's interesting in a lot of ways. So anyway, with that, there's always going to be that in the background of whatever we dive into in your personal flow.
I really, really appreciate that prologue
Yeah,
before we get into the episode. So I really appreciate it feels very affirming, confirming of what I'm been picking up as well. So I'm smiling a lot. I'm like, that's why I knew when you said what Aeon is, I'm like, I know exactly what that is because I've been seeing it.
yeah, yeah,
So I
totally.
totally get that's very much resonates for me.
Yeah,
And then it also says, okay, so that's again why today I was like, oh, today's the day with memory.
yeah,
That impulse, that nudge, like, well, what would you like to know, Kim, for you personally? And behind door number one
right.
is memory. Is your memory.
Yeah. Um, one thing that I want to say just before we get into it, and then I'll start, is that it is really, really important, no matter what, to to cultivate non a non-dual practice or a non-dual way or a non-dual kind of, the honesty and truth of the human soul, and consciousness is innately non-dual. We have a hard time accessing that sometimes, but it means that we're all situated. You know, everyone is in the center of something that might look like their own universe, and each one of those universes has a very different kind of scale. You know what I mean? So anyway, to not lose the mind, right, in the world is this year, especially with the snake, is like snake is willing to sit and listen and observe and digest the entire thing, not just the legs, not just the head. The snake is like the whole thing. Um, so anyway, whatever that means for you. Let's see. Do you want me to just dive in like you do? Like me too? Okay. Um, all right. I think I'm all set. All right. That part really needed to come out. Okay, now we're good. Hmm. This is sacred and protected space. Opening the gate, opening the oracle, welcoming the ancestors, welcoming the mother of all beings. May all information transmitted through this offering be of the most appropriate vibration for this moment. May it be of the deepest truth, and may it benefit all beings. So be it. This is so funny because I've never ever, I'll tell you my vision in a second, but I have these Kim Krans cards that are the circle cards, archetypes deck. And I made it a point to not look at any of them when I first got the deck several years ago. There are some cards that I've never pulled before. So it's really interesting. I never went through the whole deck and looked at all of them. So I bought this deck probably about 5 or 6 years ago. So this is a new card. I've never pulled it before, which is exciting. I'm always excited when there's that. It's called Threshold. The Threshold. Some feet. There's some feet standing in the void on like there's a void on one side and there's like a nesty like material and then there's this like flaming, fiery. Um this is really interesting given what I just said about snake because snake actually is a real like subterranean type of vibe like especially this snake. It's young. It is everyone that's talking about the snake year for this one, the wood snake, is talking about it being under the ground, that it's the snake that is sleeping or not even sleeping, just kind of like connected to the other snakes, going down, down, down to the part where there's warmth, um, past the frosty earth, and just something that's a little warmer. Um, this is a the hermit card. So there's that like introspection and there's this kind of darkness in a way that's necessary for figuring out like what the view is, like what is my right view, like and weeding out all of the like I mean, we're always weeding out programming, but this is definitely a great year for like questioning everything in that way, like kind of that general sense of like, I don't know, accept looking at your mind with a kind of like, with a massive openness, a kind of like, what is here? Not how I want it to be, but what is actually here with me. That threshold feels like it's coming out of a kind of dark subterranean place into like something that feels creative and passionate and fiery and maybe even combative, maybe even a little spicy. Um, the thing that I was picking up on in my vision was the when I started talking about ancestors, when I invoked the ancestors, I felt like this pressure in my rib cage that was like uh it was just there. It was this awareness of my rib cage around my heart. And I actually just had to you know, like test that a little bit in the middle of that statement, this kind of like feeling of the ancestors to pull in, to protect, to kind of armor the heart, as sometimes they like to do when they feel like they want to protect us from what is unknown in the bloodline. Like what land have we not traversed? And you're going to have a plenty of ancestral information coming through the body going, oh no, we're starting to feel something. We're starting to like test new ground that's very scary. Like, let's protect you. Um, and in my worldview, the uh, ancestors communicate with us via our body and emotions and preferences. And um, so there's that. And that's interesting to me. Then the rib cage breaks open, which is ideal, I think. The rib cage breaks open. And then I'm seeing a hand, like the hand of God, too big to see really, but it's a hand holding these ribs. And it turns into this game like pulling straws, except you're not playing against anyone. You're going to pull all the straws. Like you're just playing with yourself. And so that idea of like, well, who's going to draw the short straw and have to do the hard work? It's going to be you eventually. So there's something there, like there's a levity to it. Um, it doesn't feel bad. It just feels funny. It feels a little bit like a cosmic joke in a way. But also it's made up of this. I love how it's made up of these ribs and this open heart and the sometimes the labor that is required of us to be courageous enough to walk along the edge. And so when I pulled the threshold card, that makes a lot of sense. Um, so there seems to be a kind of bold move. Um, it's like an unavoidable kind of move that is that you're being called to make that feels like maybe you've looked around in the world and been like, okay, someone, maybe this is someone else's work, maybe it's not mine. And maybe you've been pulling those straws, and every time it's not quite you. There's something about it being you, and that there's a move that requires courage and boldness and um, this kind of there's a vulnerability with it. It's that whole thing where there's strength and vulnerability, where courage is all about the heart. Um, and this threshold thing feels really important. Um, it feels too like something that can be kind of, if it was a move that was supposed to happen in this year, I would say it would be a strike. It would be that thing where you're not questioning what you're doing while you're doing it. It's like you've already been planning this whole time, like you've been using the chi of this time to plan, to be very sure about it. And there's that strike. And with that energy, you're not guaranteed. And that's kind of the straw thing too, is like we're not 100% guaranteed the thing when we go for it. Um, but so it better be worth it. You know what I mean? Like the planning, the snake thing is so real this year. There's an opportunity for a lot of wasted chi. So if it's like people just like, oh, I'm gonna like keep doing dragon and just try this and try that and kind of maybe go on the edge of burning myself out, which is what a lot of people I know did this year. Just this like tremendous amount of energy to get so much done, to try so many different things. Um, there was a lot of room for that, and all of a sudden now it's a little bit more like, and like, no, like a lot more silence, a lot more listening, a lot more patience, and then being really sure what it is that you're doing when you do it. Uh, if we get into next year, I'm just going to get it out of the way to say this, that next year, the fire horse, it's like if you know what you're going to do in the fire, then you're good. It's good to know what you're going to do in the fire. What do you do whenever, what is your game plan when mommy and daddy are at war? Like, what are you going to do? Are you going to cower? Are you going to like, what are you going to do? The world is limitless. So, anyway, there's a way in which that energy might be really uh, horribly destructive for people, but also actually might be like really amazing, creative, like the new, the new Aeon. Um, if we go into the new Aeon, I'm certainly hoping that it is not like the old Aeon. We've been doing that for a while. So that would be nice. Um, this threshold is interesting to me. So where do I want to go next? Kind of looking into like the state of that. of the rib cage being like intact and this feeling that I was tapping into in the very beginning. And I was curious about that. Um, and let me just pull one other thing. So the card that I pulled for this sensation of that being intact with that little bit of pressure came forward as the Four of Swords, the Truce card. And oftentimes that has to do with like communicate. It can be relational. I mean, it is a relational card, but it's typically how it's like truce, and all the energy of truce. It's where there's this kind of shutdown in something isn't really moving forward, it's not really dying or being born. There's a lot of information on the field, in the relational field, and there's a kind of maybe dissonance there, and so we agree to disagree, we agree to take a break, we agree to not move forward. And so there's that tension, that pressure of like holding versus release, um, which is not sustainable. It's not sustainable, but it is necessary sometimes to have a break, to have a beat where you are putting something like that, putting the dissonance and the disagreement or whatever on hold so that you can like rest. Um, but it is not sustainable because inevitably that the fire of the heart, that kind of the wild heart wants to do what the wild heart does. So, so then we uh we break free, we bust open, um we allow the heart to do its song. And what what is this game of these? I'm just testing my vision with the cards real quick because I'm curious what they want to say about the game of straws. What is that about beyond what I've already said? And I pulled the Nine of Discs, which is to say I'm hearing like everything that's yours will come to you. Um, and that's a good thing, but it is also, it's like it can be said in both ways. Like we're good with everything that's coming to you is coming. It's yours. Um, I will say that it is mostly an auspicious card, and that's why there's such a like smile. It's one of the promise cards. It's like if you play this game, there's no. It's why we're here. The, it's it's like 95% awesome, and then this 5% of shitty to make the awesome what it is. So it's kind of like accepting the like full breadth of the game that we're playing. It was like the game was offline for a little while or on hold, and now the game is on. Um, and the general nature of that game is good. Um, and it's materially good. It's not just good in the mind or good spiritually. It being a disc card is rooted and grounded in the goodness of this material experience. Um, when I was asking about the short, there's this short straw, this short rib. What is this short rib about? And I pulled the Two of Discs, which is really about duality and how that's kind of what I was saying about that 5%, not great. Actually being that like 5% of what we experienced that we didn't anticipate, or we are disappointed by, or the world didn't meet our expectation, is the avenue through which we get to communicate with source, and we get to have that sense of excitement and pivot and newness and change that is so necessary, and that prevents us from kind of being bored. Like it can be boring to just never get the like to always be off the hook. Sometimes it's good to be on the hook so that you can have that like that sense of balance. And also it is like God talking. You know, it's like, "Oh, I'm not 100% in control of my reality." I would say that you actually are in a way with this game. It feels like you are in a way in charge of your reality, but there's that little percentage where it's like the wild card. I guess with the short stick, it's short straw. It's like where people don't want to have to do an annoying job, right? So there's something there about being like having to do something that's beneath you, or and I would you say the same thing. It's like God talking. It's like there's something about it feels vulnerable and it feels beneath you in a way, but it's got all this magic wrapped up in it. And I don't know, it's weird. Um, what is the task? What is that task? What is the short straw? I know what it's about. What is the task itself? And it's the 7 of Cups. And the 7 of Cups as a task that we wouldn't really want to do is to manage your is to go through your vision board and manage and note where maybe some of those visions are rooted in an addictive program. And that's the like, ugh, that's the like, I don't want it. I just want what's good to be good. I, this is that programming bit that I was talking about. Sometimes when we're able to just really relax and see ourselves, we can, despite all the work we've done, there's still sometimes those things that are like, okay, that's actually like the 7 of Cups is kind of like where our fantasies are, especially in this deck. It's where the fantasy is so sweet and so sticky and so much that it actually is like unhealthy. There's like a hoarding all of the honey kind of a feeling to it. It's like you're hoarding more honey. This vision has a honey thing to it and it's too much honey. And the idea is just to go in and kind of moderate it, like alchemize that vision into something that's like, I don't know, different. It's just like doing a little test, making sure that I'm not, you know, that what I'm actually wanting is good for me and not just an expression of an addiction or something like that. Debauchery. Um, it can also be related to recognizing that in another person, being like, okay, it's kind of a the what is that called? When everybody gathers around an addict and is like, you have a problem.
Intervention.
It's like the intervention card when that energy is when you're recognizing someone else's like addiction programming and you're called to say something. I can also see how that's a little stick. You got the little straw, it's your turn. You got to say the thing. um let's see. I was curious about this kind of void space or let's look at this as if we're the threshold, what was happening, going to happen. What's this threshold? What is this the threshold between? And it feels like the threshold, the before, which might be where you're at now or where you have been, uh, is the Knight of Swords. It's all planning, it's all thoughts, it's all getting all the thoughts focused and centered. It's making all of these kind of like executive decisions. It's all up in the, it's just super heady. Well, it's fiery too. It's like, it's executive shit. It's like figuring it all out. And there can be stuff about delivering orders or dictating um, how things are going to be, but mostly it's all kind of up in the ether. It's not necessarily uh, it's good with energy. It deals with an energetic kind of like mental realm, which actually has a lot of weight here on this planet to create. We can create with our minds, that kind of a thing. It's a planning, hyper heady, a hyper rooted in purpose mode, analysis, focus, discernment. There's a speed to it or a momentum to it. Where are you headed? Luckily, I mean, I'm saying luckily because we don't really want any major arcana cards this year. I just am feeling like we don't want that. And that's great. There isn't one to be seen so far. Some people are upset about that because they want to lead amazing, fantastic, like Marvel movie lives. But the collective is really kind of doing that for us now. So we've got really, it's fucking like worldwide wrestling. So what you're moving into, Ace of Discs. I love this card because there's a plan. The plan gets transmitted into a seed, the blueprint. It, the seed that holds the blueprint, the material that you can hold. It's like not even just the blueprint. It's like the beauty of there being a piece of paper that has a blueprint on it that you can hold. It's it's knowing the it's having the outline, but it's not just about thinking about the outline, it's the initiation of an outline. It's the pilot episode. It's kind of like the beginning. It's the beginning of all of the planning. Um, I love this car. I love Ace of Discs. And it's not, it's the first step of like all of the thinking and planning of the Knight of Swords. It gets an opportunity to come into the world, like in a real way, in a vulnerable way, in a way that still needs like to be babied in a way and to be deeply nourished and it's uncertain as to whether it can actually come to fruition, but that's the phase you have to go through in anything that you we do here. We have to be willing to like do the little work of putting the seed in the ground and being like, I hope you grow. And that's somewhere between, you taking care of this and God, you know. So a healthy dose of praying and laboring is good. Um, but uh it feels good. And I feel like this threshold card with all of its fire, it just feels like that seed needs fire. And so that fire, it reminds me of one of those seeds that needs fire in order to grow. And I keep associating that fire with like either interpersonal drama or uh like the good drama of it. It's like not even bad. It's like just the fire. Or you could easily pull from the craziness in the world. It's a great, especially with Fire Horse. Or that moment of strike can actually have quite a bit of flame in it. Um, the seed's great because it's good to have that on the other side of the threshold, or it's good to come out of that. It's good to have the seed this year because the wood of the snake has to do with a sprout. That's the sprout energy. The seed first sends up a little sprout. It just pokes up through the ground somehow. That force, it's crazy. It just pops up out. But then after that, the root system starts creating. And so that's what this year is. It's really like there's that first boop, and then there's all this kind of networking and all this energy starts communicating with itself and with other things, other energies. Um, Sometimes, yeah, I think that that's what I have for that, and I'm seeing where you want to go next. Do you have any driving directions or anything? Any directions you'd like me to go, or you can just consider can keep doing this? Yeah. Okay, good. All of these cards that I've been pulling are all green. They're all greens and purples, which I find interesting. Um, I want to see how this process, I'm going to ask my all purpose questions around this because I always feel like they're useful. Is there anything to release in this process? Is there anything that can be released in order to facilitate this this process of either almost kind of like going against some kind of internal mechanism of protection to be bold, to be courageous, or this process of stepping on the threshold and like being willing to go from the maturity and opulence and like executive like pizzazz of the Knight of Swords into like little seed planting in the ground, baby moments, baby steps, beginner mind, chop wood, carry water. Very looks like a demotion in a certain kind of way. And that comes up with that like little rib too. There's a little bit of a like wax on, wax off energy coming in about something, but it's so good. It's so, so good. And it also just kind of can drag the ego through. So through the fire. Um, so, um, is there anything that can be released to facilitate, whatever I've just said? Um, what to call in? So what to release? I'm just looking at that because it's like really bizarre. So okay. So I got what to release. The lust is the lust card. Um, yeah, some of that. Yeah, some of this is like there's a time and a place for that energy can get most things done. In fact, that's why I'm confused about it at first because I'm like, oh, wow, when there's seeds and fire and that kind of a thing, it's like I love the lust card for that. Um, Bringing that eros in, it's deeply feminine And like, it's very tantric actually, but that's like, no, not the way. And so when I look at what is the way, how to facilitate the process, I pulled the Knight of Wands. The Knight of Wands is like fucking like fiercely masculine and assertive and aggressive and like no, there's like one way. There is one way. In fact, I associate this often with narcissists or whatever. This is like, but there are times and places where we must apply that type of fire on fire on fire and listen to. I would say that it's like that that lust card is really more about what works for all of us, and there's this kind of like, I use all the ingredients, we're going to mix them all together, and the fire, the Knight of Wands is like, no, we're going to burn this shit, we're going to apply the flame. um and it might be that flame that allows that seed to come into fruition, to like actually get unlocked. There might be an association with, because this is the first fire card. It's interesting because there's two different kinds of fire with these cards. Like one is decidedly more like feminine. Knight of Wands is more about like, is conquest in a certain way. It's like destruction, an invitation to destroy, but also an invitation to create, because there's always the two sides of the coin, and I feel like that unlocks something about the seed. I don't really even know what the mechanism is and which plants. I think it's certain trees need fire. I think it's maybe some kind of pine tree or whatever that needs flame. Which is interesting because, a lot of the ways that people get stuff done would be through the lust card. And in this case, it's like, no, let's leave Eros at home and get the job done. In a nutshell, taking like a comb through the entirety of your existence right now, in a nutshell, because I could spend an hour, 3 hours on it all. This moment in time, the Hierophant for your soul path. This is stepping into a certain level of mastery. Um, this is stepping into teacher, into translator of deeper levels of wisdom, and even like esoteric kind of, all the things that we don't have words for. We start to take that on as a challenge and make words for all the things that we don't have words for, or we create phrases for things that most people can't understand, but certain people are beginning to understand. And that's just like a service related thing. Like, there are more and more people able to understand, especially as we move through this other whoop. There are certain things that people could not understand back before 2020, and now they could understand it. So now we're having another wave, and you're in the work that you are, and you're here doing the service, doing the work. And so there's this kind of like being called to task in that way as a kind of, translator for gestures wildly, um, and for each person to kind of find their way within that. Um, there also may be a changing of the guard for what inspires you and what you're aligned around and what who you consider your teachers. It might be a new current coming through that's like, oh, I'm feeling really inspired by this one thing that I haven't before. It's an encouragement to keep like learning and practicing um and also be aware of the way in which you may be your own current for other people too, and kind of like acknowledging the like mastery and not shying away from it. um uh that's like on a fire level, that's your life work, your soul purpose, spirituality, etc. For the relational waters, I pulled the art card. This is temperance. This is solve et coagula. This is knowing when to know. It's pulling everything apart. Um, it's putting things back together. It's a lot of you connecting with your animus and being like, you hold your animus up to the people in your world and you go like, do you match this at all? Do you match this? Not that you, not are you this, because that's not going to happen except in moments of serendipity that I don't think we can even control. But is, you know, because there's a real working going on. Your animus, I say your holy guardian angel, some people call it, your daemon, your counterpart, your etheric, kind of like non-corporeal counterpart, is trying to work with you, is trying to communicate with you, is trying in some ways, I would say, to do the lust card with you. But there's something in your field um, that isn't lining up with that. And so there's this kind of, that might be where some of the fire is, to apply the fire and drastically shift something with a person in your field. Um, I would say that it just is a time of great transformation. But on that more kind of like spiritual level, like you've got something kind of looking out for you and and wanting to come through. It might be that there's room that's being made so that you can have have your one come through, or have someone come through who's already primed and prepped and ready to reflect the energy of that animus. Um, I love that card. I love that. So we are getting the major arcana cards coming forward with regard to your like the big picture in fire and water. For your headspace, I'm getting the Prince of Discs, which is very uh it's very businessy. It's very but bit salt of the earth business. The mind is really like your mental realm is really uh kind of urging you towards making very simple, clear moves that are not nuanced by emotion, that are really like, if we want this, then we do this. And um, that's actually really good. I'd say that's like, it's good to have that like pacing. It's very rational. It's like, if I want certain things to happen, then these things need to happen. And there's no like, but what if kind of a thing at all. It's decidedly and necessarily kind of like dull in a way. Like those disc cards can get a little bit dull, especially the courts, because they can be so like, what you see is what you get. But in times of chaos, or when it's very refreshing. In fact, I guess it's like when you have that really, really super rational friend that isn't ever moved by anything, and they're just like, you just put the thing in the thing and it's fine. Like, you know what I mean? It's just like, oh, that's all there is. You're like, oh, that's so easy. Like, wow, what a relief to live like that and not be just seeing it in these multidimensional ways all the time. And then for your material reality, there's something there. You got the Four of Cups, which it represents, I mean, this is in the Earth section. Four of Cups, something that was promised to be a certain way just isn't. And so there's just that sense of, and it does have to do with like there's a relational thing because it's water, it's the cups. So there's just something that did a big promise. It's the luxury card. It's like you've got to, it's like when you think you're going to go on a great cruise and then you get there and you're like everybody has neurovirus and the food's bad and like you're not happy. Like you just have diarrhea on in paradise. Um, so that would be like, making adjustments. Um, the fours just that you have those two fours in this reading, and those fours are just they represent this kind of moment of like static, like snapshot, and it's not satisfying after a while. Like it might feel like a refuge. It might be like, it might have been what you wanted or what was good for a moment. And then it's like, okay, there's nothing else here. So we're going to move forward. And we move forward by literally just utilizing that rational mind, make a plan, and then it's just setting the fire to the thing in a way that's almost kind of like devoid of like passion. It's just fucking fire. It's just like all the CEOs that are like, we just want money. It's that energy. It's like we just want money. I just want what I want. I'm not here in any deep way. We're just making all these decisions because of money. We don't actually care about anybody. We're just like, you know. And so but it's good to do that in this situation. It's good to have that kind of like distance from a thing so that you can set it on fire and not like go down with it, I guess is the point that I'm trying to make. Sometimes it's okay to apply that type of energy to something. And it seems to be incredibly fruitful. Um, and that's, yeah, it seems to be like opening up to something that's really, really, really good. Like I'm excited about this seed.
Me too.
Yeah,
I'm wondering if we can get information about the potential of the seed. Like,
yeah,
yeah, I would be curious about that.
yeah. We can do that real quick. So yeah, like um, looking into the potential of the seed. Um, given the trajectory of everything, yeah, with knowing who you are and the way you move through things and all of that, where do we stand with that? Where does this seed, what is the nature of this seed's blueprint and its potential to like come into being? I pulled the Hermit card. All right. So it's connected to this year.
Mm-hmm.
It is about the journey. It's about breaking free of, it's about, first of all, just about breaking free of the confines of things that have been um, either havens or prisons, and to kind of risk the like wilderness or the darkness or the place where you can go where you actually really feel yourself. It's like moving out of comfort and into terrain where your body, your mind, soul, your whole field becomes your home. And you learn from that place, as opposed to being in in a thing that makes you feel like comfortable in that kind of a sleep way. Like sometimes it's important to go on the big journey or take the step where you're like, all I've got is this. Like, and all of a sudden, because this is so different out in the field, I'm needing to really find that kind of place of that my own flame. And what I see coming out of this of the hermit in terms of potential is like amazing. It's like what we get when we're able to apply ourselves 100% focus to our own internal wisdom and like our own and everything that comes out of that. And the way the things that we have to share on the other side of that can look like all the things that the uh, um, the magnum opus, I don't opie, I don't know what the plural of that is, for people to like see your work. It's this kind of invitation to really have that like philosopher's stone type thing at the end of that journey. But it requires like being away from the like incessant projections of others. And most of the time, I mean, as a seed, I mean, that's also really like sharing and expressing your own viewpoint, which isn't that's like stepping into your own current, not serving anybody else's current, but stepping into your own and having that kind of like the authority of your own current. That's why they're like an old man, because it's like I've walked everybody else's road. I've walked along with the currents that have supported me, like lineage, teaching lineage. And all of a sudden, you know, all of that alchemizes and something that's greater than the sum of those parts comes forward, and that's your current. And there's just something about having to step maybe into unknown circumstances or an environment that is unfamiliar, or a stepping away from people who are familiar really helps facilitate that. Um, and it's also like for whatever develops out of that, the process of like refuge, peace within the self, like peace, like just coming into stillness, not needing to grasp for anything because everything is coming from within. It's like really tapping into some deep shit. It's tapping into some deep shit, but not a lot of like really intense company along the road. Maybe some allies here and there, maybe a little guide here and there, but not a lot of like, it's almost like that it's almost like that animus is like calling you inside to reconnect. Yeah. And that Knight of Wands, as opposed to the Lust card is very relational. And the Knight of Wands is very, I've got everything I need. A little more dramatic than the Hermit, but yeah, the Knight of Wands could make a good space around the Hermit. Yeah. Any last little bits? I'm gonna ring the bell
Okay.
for the end. For
To
the
the
end.
end.
For the end.
Go.
All right. Here we go. For anything wanting to stick its neck out or grasp or reach or analyze or is confounded by the mystery and the uncertainty. I'm just like put, setting it all on fire and letting the ash just fall. It's just okay. Everything can rest. Everything can kind of settle. Um, yeah, that's what I'm doing right now. That's what I did. Calling in the the golden circuitry of your birthright of being human, a willful human in the world, doing your work, just asking continued blessings of your ancestors and guides, and that strong, clear relationship to the animus. Let it remain clear, let it be clearer, let your steps feel uh, sure. Let them feel sure. All right, sorry, just seeing shit. Just like seeing golden footsteps in this kind of void without any dimension, like, but just these steps that are really clear. Step here, no problem. You just follow my lead. There's that kind of energy coming from the animus in a way, which is really beautiful.
Mm.
And finally, anchoring the session in the remembrance of what has been shared today and also in gratitude for being able to come together and explore the mystery. Thank you.
Thank you so, so much, Memory.
You're so welcome.
All right,
So
I'll see you
welcome.
next time.
All right, take care. Blessings.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.